Now for Global Business Updates, Rotus Oddiri joins us. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Dr. Abati, Vimbai, and Adefemi.
Hi, morning.
Yeah, so the interview with Peter Obi was pretty. He was just focusing on Nigeria today, particularly the Naira and electricity. Particularly part great, and Rufai, well done to him for a really in-depth interview there. Particularly the focus has been the chatter since that interview was the floating of the Naira and how he said he would approach it in a gradual manner while boosting productivity first. So here's that part of that clip.
Dealing with what you're talking about, issue of Naira. There's nothing wrong with floating your currency. There's nothing wrong in even devaluing your currency. But you do this when you have productivity. What devaluation or floating does is that your currency becomes, in terms of value, low. You attract investment.
So would you have floated the Naira if you got in? And how? You said there's nothing wrong with it. Would you have floated the Naira? Tell me the precept upon precept at which you will have floated the Naira.
I would have been doing it in an organized manner.
What's the organized manner?
I would have focused on making sure that we ramp up production in agriculture, in manufacturing, and everything, and do it gradually.
So you will have kept on defending it until we ramp up production.
It's not, you're not defending it.
Yeah.
Because even in the so-called currency, there were criminality as well.
Right. So, it's, again, a lot of chatter since then. So the thing is that there's been a lot of focus on the urgency in devaluing the currency, right? And when he talks about boosting productivity, what are the building blocks for boosting productivity? It's not just education, it's also skills. We're just talking before we came on air. Adefemi knows how to use Adobe Premiere Pro. Vimba, you know how to use CapCut. Final Cut, excuse me. CapCut is the other app. Faith she knows how to, correspondent in Abuja, knows how to operate a camera, right? So if someone else was to get sick, a technician or something, you can fill in because you've got skills that are attributable to your role in addition to what you do. Also need electricity, also need technology. The amount of time it would take to boost this while you are gradually floating the Naira essentially would not address some of the other urgent issues. Another was the $7 billion backlog that was cleared by the central bank. The reason why that backlog grew to $7 billion was because there was not enough foreign exchange in order to give to foreign companies that were trying to repatriate their profits out of Nigeria. So if you give Naira to an airline, when you're paying for tickets, that airline would take your Naira, go to the central bank and say, hey, this is all my accumulated Naira profits. I need to convert this to dollars so I can exit the country. There was not enough foreign exchange. So you had, over time, if you are gradually devaluing, you are still not able to address the backlog that has been building because of FX scarcity. So a third thing is the chart I've used several times that shows the gap between the parallel markets and the official rates. If you go all the way back to January of 2023, if your auntie in Florida was to send you $1,000, would you go through official channels and change it at 400 to get 400,000? Or would you go to the parallel markets and get 800,000? You would go to the parallel market. So the official channels were suffering because of the fact that the parallel market was dictating the rate. So you see the chart moving all the way to the right to October 2020 when you have a unification. You don't need to go to the parallel markets. It comes through official channels. And it was because the Naira is at a level where it is fully liberalized. You find the level. The government has told investors you can bring your money in and take it out. Foreign exchange comes in, you pay off the backlog, and you are able to unify the rate. So what was coming was, hey, listen, I wish he had gone into it a little bit further. How would he have been able to address the backlog and address the unification of the rates with a very partial, gradual, we're not sure what percentage he was referring to, partial devaluation of the currency. I understand you have an electricity guest coming up later on today. So that he didn't touch on that, right? And one of the main issues, of course, is still the partial partial subsidies that remain in the electricity sector, because electricity is one of the building blocks of productivity. A student who is using, pencil and paper to prepare for exam versus one who is using a laptop, who's going to move faster in preparation? The laptop also needs to be charged, right? In addition to the skills that you need to use that particular laptop. So electricity is crucial. And if you remember, just to go back, we hit peak outputs in terms of megawatts per hour back on, March 4th, 5,801. Prior to that, March 2021 was 5,801.6. It's 5,801.4. Minister Adelabu, who you're going to be talking about, the Honorable Minister of Power, said the following about reaching this, and again, it's as far as what we can what TCN is able to do, the transmission company, it's about 13,000 megawatts. We only meet 5,008. He said, or 5,800. The results seen so far have been due to a partial implementation of reforms in the sector, and based on this trajectory, we'll see further improvements in the sector. He continues, when he was addressing this peak generation that we hit, that to sustain these improvements, the government would have to pay down on the tariff shortfalls of 1.94 trillion for 2024 and legacy debts of 2 trillion to the GENCOs. So you're practically at 4 trillion now. It would be important to continue the tariff reforms to ensure consumers start to pay for the energy consumed. So, again, back to the argument of, he even has one more quote, excuse me. So he then concludes and says, by the time the tariffs are fully regularized, we'll be moving closer to 7,000 megawatts of available generation capacity. So again, going back to the productivity argument that, okay, look, I won't float for now. I will just do it gradually and boost productivity. How do you address the role that electricity plays in that? So, this is still the last of the three-headed dragons that needs to be, or the last head of the dragon that needs to be slayed in electricity, right? They've addressed FX, they've addressed fuel, but you still have to address that last one. And again, it would, going forward as we get closer and closer to the, election years and so on, it would be nice to hear other candidates who specifically, address how their different approach would have, alleviated what Nigerians are feeling, because this is basically ripping off the Band-Aid in order to be able to get foreign exchange inflows and alleviate the fiscal structure. So that's essentially the points made in that regard. And again, we're looking forward to the electricity guests you have later on today to discuss that. That's our update for today.
Go ahead.
Okay. All right.
I'm the student in the room.
All right. If you look at those, some of the pillars that you highlighted, especially if we start with productivity and that being skill-based, Peter Obi is clearly a believer in gradualism. And you're an economist, so you know that the debate between gradualists and shock therapy is an ongoing historical debate. We will fight until the end of time, right? And people who advocate for gradualism just say that reforms should have a more human face. Whereas people who advocate for shock therapy say that, no, get it done and dusted, people will catch up, right? So it's an ideological debate. Which is better than the other? We could be here for hours and write theses and get doctorates off of that argument. Yeah. But on skills, on this one, I agree with you, because if you look at probably one of the best upskilling human capital development revolutions in the world, South Korea, under Park Chung-hee in the 1960s going into the 70s, and it was 3 5-year plans. So it took 10 to 15 years for them to be able to realize the full benefit of developing human capital.
And they lifted people out of poverty while doing that.
Yes. Yeah. So that's a process. But now you make a valid point, which is that they were able to lift out people out of poverty while doing that. So they were able to invest and subsidize in productivity. So I think that it is possible if you're able to get some investment from somewhere, because the question is who's ready to invest? Well, you have your Chinas, you have your non-conventional, it's not your Western investors that would do so. So if he's saying that he's looking at gradualism, where he had some sort of goodwill from investors who are ready to come in and partner with Nigeria to get industry growing while human capital is also developing, I think that's an interesting model to look at. However, we also need to remember when we're looking at foreign currency and floating the Naira, a lot of the biggest issue was arbitrage. It was the fact that there were people who were more important more important and, fall outside the realms of the law, were able to get this foreign currency from the central bank and sell it on the parallel market. So it was an artificial disunity between those two exchange rates. So if there's the goodwill to come in and say, listen, I'm cutting this corruption out of CBN, possibly that gradual management of going to float might have been done in a shorter period of time as well. So it's all theory. It's easy to debate in theory.
Right.
When we get into the ring and we start playing, we are all Ronaldo from the sidelines. So that's my take on him. So I don't think he was too far off.
Okay, yesterday I commented at length on the interview with Mr. Peter Obi. And I said that on the issue of productivity, he's very consistent on that score. He has always said, look, the emphasis within the economy should not be consumption, it should be productivity. Secondly, he said that, government removed fuel subsidy, tinkered with the foreign exchange regime without proper planning. And because of that, he said he was asking for transparency and accountability. And I argued that to the extent that he has been consistent and that these are issues that Nigerians have also raised, they are not points that you can argue with. But the presidency has since spoken yesterday. And I signposted that the presidency will react. And speaking through Daniel Boala, they said Peter Obi has very shallow knowledge of governance and government processes. And that was Daniel Boala saying that. However, you have now come reinventing the same topic. The point about those building blocks about productivity, they are no-brainers. If you see electricity, yes, you need electricity to be able to have growth. This is what every commonsensical person has always said, that you can't have a country of over 200 million people, and you are talking of, you are celebrating 7,000, a projection of 7,000 megawatts. Compare it to what they have in South Africa, even where there is problem with the generation and distribution of electricity, or what they have in other African countries. So I don't think we should celebrate, we are having a projection of 7,000 megawatts. That's disgraceful. Two, you talked about technology. Everybody knows that technology is the future. We're now in the age of AI, artificial intelligence. Bill Gates, who has been visiting Nigeria, he has even been saying that you need artificial intelligence even to drive your primary healthcare system. And he was talking about innovation. These are commonsensical things. And then education. Mr. Peter Obi himself said that one of the things he dealt with as governor when he was given an account was to focus on education in Anambra State. Because, of course, if you don't have a skillful population, you won't simply be able to compete. But the government has a different idea. They think that he's talking from a partisan position and that he doesn't understand what he's saying. Well, what do you expect them to say is from the opposition, and that will go that way. However, what I thought, we should also discuss this morning is the meeting in London yesterday between the Chinese negotiators led by Besant and the American negotiators led by Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, and the Chinese negotiators led by Vice Premier Li Yifeng, talking about the trade dispute, the conflict between both parties. That meeting is going to continue today. And President Trump says he's very optimistic, he's getting good reports. On the basis of that, Asian stocks, the Asian markets are doing very well. Whether it's the KOSPI, the Coast Guard, the Nifty, where the Nifty came in flat, or the mainland China CSI 300, or the Hong Kong Hang Seng Index. Even in Wall Street, all the indexes in Wall Street are doing well. There is the projection that S&P 500 is going to do also very well in the days to come. However, the fear is, while China and the United States are trying to mend fences, U.S. has reduced some restrictions between yesterday and today. China is saying, they will lift the restriction on rare earth materials. how long will these negotiations take? We're so likely, as a result of this fight between the two major economies in the world, likely to see still a lot of volatility, a lot of elevator movement in the markets, whether in Asia or in the United States. Yeah. But people are optimistic that if the two big economies are able to resolve their differences, maybe it will be to the benefit of the rest of the world.
Yeah. Quick points here. So the update yesterday was, it was a 6-hour meeting. All the talk came from the US. Sources said that there would be a slight pullback on those chip curbs, but nothing official has come back out. The Chinese, Hugh Lefeng, didn't actually say anything to the media yesterday, so nothing has actually been updated. Going back to Nigeria and the power thing, not that these megawatts are being celebrated, Doctor. The point is that it is the 4 trillion naira that is owed to the Gencos and the legacy debts, 2 trillion to the Gencos, another legacy debts of 1.94, that is holding back the electricity sector. So it's not about celebrating it. It's the point being put forward by Delabo is that, is that until you pay off those tariffs, and until you remove those subsidies, you will not get the subsequent improvement in electricity output that we are looking for. So that's it. So it's not about saying, oh, these are things we already know. Yes, we know them, but the point is that what is holding Nigeria back from getting to where she needs to be in terms of 24/7 electricity?
More than 7,000 megawatts.
Of course, for sure.
This is what I'm saying.
Yes, I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
I mean,
even as projections, it's embarrassing for a country of so many people. Including people who came from Zimbabwe,
yes, we need light.
to add to our population.
We came here looking for light, and
Thank you very much.
Thank you.